everybody, and welcome to the fifth video on solving quadratic equations. In this video, we have a look at solving quadratic equations by completing the square. So this is one of the methods that we can use to solve a quadratic equation that's of a trinomial form. So if you would like to attempt the question, pause it now and then we can do the question together. For those of you who would like to then just try it, we can go ahead with question 1. So there's steps to solving a quadratic equation by completing the square, and the first step is to complete the square. So what are the steps in completing the squares? First, we have to get our x terms together and get the numbers on the other side. So here we have 4x squared plus 3x, and then we're going to take the 1 over to the other side. This way is much different from the way that we usually solve it, because usually we try and get one side equal to 0 and factorize. In this case over here, we are not trying to do that. We're going to complete the square in x's and then solve for x. Okay, so then that's the first step. The second step is to find the last, before we find the last term, is to make the coefficient of x squared 1. Okay, and in an equation that is pretty simple. All we have to do is divide everything by 4. Okay, so then what we're going to get is x squared plus 3 over 4x is equal to 1/4. Then our next step is to find the last term. So remember this, that the last term is the coefficient, square brackets means the coefficient of x divided by 2, or if you like, the coefficient of x times 1/2. Dividing by 2 and multiplying by 1/2 is the same thing. And then what we're going to do is then square it, and that's how we get the last term. So here the coefficient of x is 3 over 4, and then we're going to multiply it by 2. So then we're going to multiply by 2. So times, 1/2, or divide by 2, whichever one you like. So that is equal to 3 over 8. And then what we're going to do is we're going to square it. Okay, and that will then give us 9 over 64. So then what we're going to do with the last term is we're going to add it to both sides. So we have x squared plus 3 over 4x is equal to 1/4. And now we're going to add this last term on both sides. So plus 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64. So the reason why we add it on both sides is so that we don't change the equation. Okay, now what we have to do is then these three terms form a perfect square, and that perfect square, it's going to be x. And then before you squared it, whatever that term was would be there. So it would be plus 3 over 8, and take it with the sign, squared. And then we can add this 1/4 and 9 over 64. So 1/4 plus 9 over 64, that is equal to 25 over 64. Okay, there we have completed the square. Now we're going to solve for x. So the first thing that's attached to x is the square. So we're going to square root both sides. So if we square root this side and we square root this side, the square and the square root cancel out, and we get x plus 3 over 8. And what you need to remember is when you're square rooting, you're going to get plus or minus. So square root of 25 over 64 is 5 over 8. Why do we get plus? Just a side note is remember that 1 times 1 is 1. And remember that minus 1 times minus 1 is 1. So whenever you're square rooting, the square root of 1 can either be 1 or minus 1. So that's why we always put the plus or minus when square rooting. Then last thing is we want to get rid of this 3 over 8. So this is equal to plus or minus 5 over 8 minus 3 over 8, because we're taking it over, its sign changes. So then x is equal to 5 over 8 minus 3 over 8. So that's the positive solution, which is then 2 over 8, which we can simplify to 1/4, or x is equal to minus 5 over 8 minus 3 over 8, which is minus 8 over 8, which is minus 1. So there are our two solutions by completing the square. We're going to do this process another 2 more times so you get the hang of it. So let us have a look at another one. So we got 8x minus 2x squared is equal to -1. Great, so this is already in the form that we want. I'm just going to actually swap the x squared and x around. I'm just pedantic like that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we need the coefficient of x squared to be 1, so we're going to divide everything by a -2. And then what we're going to get is x squared minus 4x is equal to +1/2. The next thing is to get the last term. So remember from the previous one, the last term is the coefficient of x divided by 2 and squared. So the coefficient of x is -4 divided by 2, and then we're going to square it. So that is -2 squared, which is 4. So then that last term, again, we add it on both sides. And again, why we're adding it on both sides is so that we're doing nothing, so we're not changing the equation. So we're going +4 and +4. Then what we can do is factorize this into its perfect square. So this here is, remember before you squared it, that's the term. So x minus 2 squared is equal to 1/2 plus that, so let's say 9/2. Then we're going to square root both sides. So x minus 2 is equal to the square root plus or minus, because remember we're going to get plus or minus that point that we made of 9/2. And finally, we're going to take the 2 over, so it's going to be plus or minus root 9/2 plus 2. So we're going to get two solutions. The first one is x is equal to positive root 9/2 plus 2. And then the other one is x is equal to negative 9/2 plus 2. You can put this answer in whichever form that they then requested, whether it is simplest third form, rounding up to the first or second or third decimal place. You can do whatever they have requested. Let us do the third one and let us see if you have understood. So we have 7x squared minus 14x minus 2 is equal to 0. So we're first going to take that 2 over. So we're going to get 7x minus 14x is equal to 2. So these are the first two terms of the perfect square. We would like the coefficient of x squared to be 1. So we're going to divide everything by its coefficient, which is 7. So that becomes x squared minus 2x is equal to 2/7. Okay, great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to find the last term. So the last term is the coefficient of x divided by 2, and we square it. The coefficient of x is -2. We divide it by 2 and we square it. So it's -2 divided by 2, which is 1. Squared is 1. So that is our last term. So then what we're going to do is add it on both sides. Okay, and then that's +1 plus 1. Then we're going to have that this here then forms these three terms form the complete square. Sorry, I don't know why the sign here changed from minus to positive. It's negative. So it's still negative. So our perfect square is then x minus, remember the term before you squared, minus 1 squared is equal to 1 plus 2/7 is 9/7. Then we're going to square root both sides to get the x minus 1 by itself. So this is plus minus the square root of 9/7. And then we're going to take the 1 over. So this is plus minus the square root of 9/7 plus 1. So our two solutions then are x is equal to the square root of 9/7 plus 1, or x is equal to negative the square root of 9/7 plus 1. And there you can then round it off or put it in whichever form that was requested. I hope that you have understood these three examples. If you have not, please try and watch the video again, and please watch the other videos on solving quadratic equations using factorizing and the formula.